What's up, YouTube? I got another little Death Shadow video for you. This is a league we played on stream a couple days ago. So if you're wanting to see the full live VOD, you can go find it on our Twitch at twitch.tv/the_control freak, or the link will be down in the description below. So, like I said, played some 4-color. Originally saw that a player named Magic Ed on Magic Online had 5-0'd a couple leagues with 4-color Shadow. Their variation was quite a bit different. Dragon's Rage Channelers over Ragavans, Bolts over Heats, included Street Wraith, Dismember, Teamer Battle Rage, and Underworld Breach, stuff like that. So if that's a little more up your speed, then that's definitely a list that you might want to check out. Maybe we end up playing a list or a league with that list at some point. But I wanted to do 4-color kind of my way. For example, the Ragavans over the Dragon's Rage Channelers. I think that Ragavan, even though Bowmaster is a very popular card, Ragavan has a much higher upside in the unfair matchups. It's great for mana fixing. It's great for card advantage. And I just think it overall has more of an impact on the game than Dragon's Rage Channeler more often than not. I've got 3 Unholy Heat, 2 Lightning Bolt, 1 Push is my 1 mana interaction, along with 2 Terminates. Really wanted to maximize my ways of fighting over like scammed Griefs and Furies early. So having access to main deck Terminate, Unholy Heat, if I can get Delirium online, really helps with those. The 4 Goy, 4 Bowmaster, 4 Shadow, 2 Kroxa. I'll talk about the Kroxa in a second. 1 Drown in the Lock with the 4 Stubborn Denial is kind of like our counter suite. 3 Fable the Mirror Breaker. Fable's really been overperforming for me out of decks like Jund Shadow, out of some of the Grixis variants that we've tried out. So I wouldn't sleep on that card. And the Kroxa. So Kroxa seems like a really odd inclusion in a 4-color Shadow deck. You're like, oh, well, 4-color. How are you going to have red-black? But I was looking at the original mana base, and it was like 2 Blood Crypts, Overgrown Tombs, Swamp, Steam Vent, Stomping Ground, Watergrave, and I was like, huh. Every single one of those produces either black or red. That's pretty cool. So I decided I was going to give Kroxa a try. Like, Kroxa's been really good out of Jund for me, especially comboing with Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but also just being like a reasonable turn 2 play in a matchup where it's going to get interactive and grindy. And Kroxa can almost like single-handedly win the scam matchup if you're able to answer that early Fury or Grief. So thought I'd give it a shot. In the sideboard, 2 Mystical Dispute, 1 Spell Pierce, 2 Fatal Push, 2 Alpine Moon, 2 Terra Sunder, a Veil of Summer, 2 Engineered Explosives, 1 Unlicensed Hearse, 1 Nihil Spellbomb, and Giganta as our companion. So the original list couldn't run Giganta because of Street Wraith and Dismember, but I think that especially in a list like this where you're going to be pretty drawn out, especially against Blood Moon, having access to Giganta, Fable, Ragavan, really, really nice at making sure you're not just like dead in the water to that card. And with Murktide, Scam, and Rhinos all running around, you know you're pretty likely to see some number of Blood Moon. So I think having the ability to fight through that is extraordinarily important right now. But other than that, the only other like little bit of advice if you're thinking about 4-color is be careful in the thought that the extra like 3rd and 4th colors are free, because they absolutely are not. For example, we're only on Goyf or green in the main, only on Drown and some stubs for blue. So we're basically a Rakdos shell, splashing green, splashing blue, which is a lot different from like a traditional Grixis shell that's really heavy on black, red, and blue. So there's going to be a number of games that if your mana is too constrained, like let's look at an example of I've got a couple fetch lands, a Ragavan, a Shadow, a Bolt, a Goyf, maybe like a Fable. Pretty reasonable hand. And I want to get that Stomping Ground on turn 1 to be able to Ragavan. Because I've got the Goyf. I need the green for Goyf. I need the red for Ragavan. Like, Shadow's a ways off, so I don't need the black yet. But then you top deck a Thoughtseize. and now all of a sudden you can't Thoughtseize into Shadow on turn 2 because you got Stomping Ground on turn 1, assuming your Ragavan doesn't survive. So that can lead to some very awkward openers. Or you've got the same situation and you want to get the Blood Crypt instead to go get the Ragavan online and have your Shadow out, but you're not running Breeding Pool because you got Kroxa. So now on turn 2 for your Goyf, you have to get the Overgrown Tomb or you have to get the Stomping Ground. And if you get the Stomping Ground, now you can't Thoughtseize Shadow. If you get the Overgrown Tomb, now you don't have blue for Stubborn Denial or Drown in the Loch. So you do have to be very, very mindful of what you're fetching and when. And it can very easily come back to haunt you if you're not pretty cognizant of what your potential draws are versus how it lines up with your current hand. So let's just go ahead and jump in and get rolling, and we'll talk about some of the decisions as we go along. So through the magic of CGI, we are on to round number 1. It's okay, keep on the draw. We've got turn 1 Bobble, maybe stub something, turn 2 Goyf, turn 3 Fable. Opponent leads on a Ragavan. A little less exciting for us. We're going to check out our top card in case it's a red removal spell to take out the Rag. Unfortunately, it was not, so we're going to have to take a hit off this. With Sacred Foundry, I'm kind of assuming it's like a Boros mid-range deck, maybe like a Stone Blade or something. But Zagoth Triumph Bowmasters means it's almost assuredly Domain Zoo, as we can see from the Leyline binding there. I thought for a chance it would be like, or I thought for a second it would be white fetches to get basic planes to be able to Blood Moon. But nope, just Zoo. So we'll go to sideboarding. Sideboarding against Zoo. Boarding out Ragavan in this version a little more aggressively because of Bowmasters. And boarding out Thoughtseizes pretty aggressively because they are like a deck that finishes off with Tribal Flames and Bolt. Boarding in Fatal Pushes for a lot of the cheap threats. Terra Sunders, mostly for Scion. I didn't know they were playing up the Beanstalk until this game. So thankfully we had a stub. But mostly for Scion. Mostly for, and for like Hidetsugu, Engineered Explosives, stuff like that. But if I get to take out an Up the Beanstalk with it, that's pretty sweet too. Turn 2, play out the Kroxa. I could play out Shadow, but with it being dead to Bolt or like Tribal Flames, I don't really want to throw it out for no reason. And then since I drew the 5th land, I could escape the Kroxa. But instead, I'm going to play out the Shadow, hold up the Stub, and have the ability to escape the Kroxa with Stub back up next turn if my opponent doesn't do anything too scary, which I think I have to counter a second Beanstalk. I could flash in Bowmasters here in response to the Beanstalk trigger. Probably should, but I don't know. I was kind of thinking I might want to save this Bowmaster for like a Ragavan, or if I need to ping off something. It's a little wishful thinking. Then we get our Ragavan. So now I can there. Now I can attack in. If they had double blocked with the Ragavan and the Scion, then I could have pinged down the Ragavan before damage. So did get a little bit of a break for holding on to that Scion, or holding on to the Bowmasters. Attack to get that last card out of hand. Get Scion attacking. And opponent's down to 1, so as long as they don't draw a Tribal Flames exactly right there, we should be okay. Or if they found like a Leyline Binding or any 5-drop, we could flash in the Bowmaster, ping them, and then the Beanstalk trigger would force another draw, we'd ping them again. So we do get to Thoughtseize away Beanstalk. We see a Tribal Flames and a Fury, so fairly weak hand. And this is like one of the times that I love Croxa so much, is being able to pressure the hand when you're not doing anything on like these turn twos and stuff. And then being able to follow it up a few turns later with unearthing it or escaping it. Sorry. So I'm just like a really big fan of some of the potential lines that Croxa allows you to take advantage of. So they've got 4 lands. They've got Fury and Tribal Flames. Really glad that they did not attempt to Tribal Flames me there. Because now, if they top deck a land, they have to make the decision between Tribal Flames and Fury. And they elect to go for the Fury, which means I get to escape the Croxa, get the Tribal Flames out of hand. Fetch down to 6. If I draw a fetch land, I'm presenting potential lethal with the Shadow. I'm completely okay with if they block, because I do get to just escape Croxa again. So Croxa gets the Tribal Flames out of hand. Opponent attacks. I'm dead to a Bolt, Bowmaster, or Tribal Flames if I don't block. So I decide to throw the blocker out there. And yeah, Croxa doing some serious work. On to match number 2. Let's talk mulligan decision. I believe that was just like a 1-lander, so probably pretty easy mulligan. Yeah, so on the play, I've got 2, or technically 3 2-drops, a Fable that's 2 lands away, a Croxa that's 3 lands away. I think I have to ship this. And then on a mold of 6, like, it's not getting much better. I did see a lot of times over the course of this league that I was stuck on 1 land. So if you're playing or planning on playing some 4-color Shadow, I would highly, highly recommend going up to the 19th, maybe the 20th land. So played our opponent's Hanger back for 0 there to get it in the graveyard to add both artifact and creature for Tarmogoyf. Thought it was important enough to put the pressure on. We could have cast the Hanger back for 1, but that was me forgetting Pendelhaven. I just completely forgot that it was going to buff up the Patchwork Automaton past the Ragavan. But unfortunately, with Thoughtseize, we see double Ravager, so we can't do anything about the Ravager. If I had another land, we'd have Terminate access. But alas, that is not the case. So we are going to end up dying to a Ravager, sacking itself to an unblocked Automaton. But going into game 2, we do get access to cards like Alpine Moon, Terra Sunder, Engineered Explosives. Get some of these Ragavans out of here. Trim a couple Bowmasters. Because if they have like a Hardened Scales and Bowmasters isn't pinging something down, then it's really not worth it. And if you have a lot of things you're wanting to bring in, like extra copies of Artifact or Enchantment Hate, maybe Natural State, something like that, then trimming extra Bowmasters is probably the first step I would go towards. Get to take away as the boss. Hanger back gets a couple tokens, but we've got a Shadow that outpaces these tokens, assuming we find something else to do. Completely okay if they want to block and ping me. They choose not to, so we'll go ahead and escape Croxa. Again, Croxa looking like a house. 6/6 body. Ditch the last card in your hand. I did want to make sure I did the math there before I escaped Croxa. Nice little turn pause. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't dead if they like found a land and were able to pump the ballista. But I'm not. So we get to kill off the ballista and kill them. So, nice. Kroxa, again, doing a great job at controlling the hand and providing a very big body. Reasonable game 3 hand. Blue's not too exciting, but we've got access to a couple removal spells. Tarmogoyf's a really good threat. I think this is one of the freeze spots. So, yeah, we'll fast forward through that a little bit. Just a friendly reminder that today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, me. So if you get a kick out of like the cheesy thumbnails, I'm to blame. If the editing for the video is horrific and it makes it unwatchable, you're welcome. So get the welding jar out of here. Get down Goyf. We do have just like Fatal Push, more Goyfs. So we've got a pretty good clock. Hanger back is annoying. Don't get me wrong. And it looks like they're wanting to go all in on it. I could like kill the hanger back there in response, but I'm kind of thinking of taking the approach of just attacking around the hanger back. Because if stuff like this happens and my opponent keeps playing out their cards, then I probably have a really good chance of racing the hanger back if they block, or racing the Thopter tokens. And since they've decided so much to not block, I just get to play out Goyfs and kill them. So go to my untap so I can play my removal spell with stub back up, just in case they have like a sack effect or something that I don't know about. It's just kind of free to go to my turn and then cast it with a counter. No lander, mole. So this is match number 3, I believe. Leading on tap Blood Crypt makes me believe Scam, but Scam without a turn 1 play seems a little odd. But is in fact Scam. Scam with not that great of a hand. Finding third land for Fable is great. Because we bobbled and we saw the Polluted Delta, we know their hand perfectly until this next draw. But I am okay with just providing as much pressure as I can. Hold up stub in case they wanted to go for an Undying effect. But since they don't, I'm assuming they're just going to hard cast a Grief this turn. So I'd rather play out the Goyf to get the most pressure possible. Plus Goyf doesn't die to a hard cast Fury. So I know I'm going to have the ability to be pretty aggressive with swinging in since I'm outpacing them pretty well right now. Gigantha, hold up stub. I'm expecting a hard cast Fury, but then my opponent throws a curveball and plays out a Fable into the known stub. So I have to assume that this means they've got like another Bowmaster or an Undying effect right here. Because that's about the only thing I can think they could have that wouldn't involve playing out another copy or playing out the Fury instead, since it trades with a Goyf. But either way, get down Goyfs. Again, since they're not playing Fury, I'm assuming another copy of Bowmasters or an Undying effect, which as soon as they show me the Bowmasters means I get to kill the Grief for free. Bowmaster down their Bowmaster before they can get an Undying effect. And now even if they untap and hardcast Fury, they're on double chump duty to the 2 Goyfs. So I know they're not able to draw both a land and an Undying effect. I could Thoughtseize, but I don't want to put myself dead to like Bolt. So instead we'll just play out Gigantha. And I think the only thing we die to at this point is Terminate plus Dash Ragavan plus hit something off of our library that stops us, like hitting a Bolt off our library. Or Bowmaster buys a turn. Either way. Game 2. Sideboarding against Scam. Veil of Summer's coming in. Fatal Push usually comes in. Unlicensed Hearse, Nihil Spellbomb, and then I'll bring in Terra Sunder a reasonable bit, and it's mainly because it answers not only like Fable of the Mirror Breaker on their side, but it can hit Hidetsugu, it can hit Blood Moon, and you can also just kick it and exile like a Fury or a Grief. And because it exiles, they can't have an Undying effect on it. So it's a pretty solid card just to be able to kind of clear up the big annoying thing. Here they're tapped out, so I get to terminate the Fury. I just really need to find another land, like a green source, and I could feel kind of okay. But it's going to be tough to come from behind if I'm not able to find more lands. So with opponent passing, I'm just going to kill off one of these tokens so they get a little less mana available. Maybe they can't hard cast a Fury this turn. And still no third land. This is kind of what I was talking about with the mana can be a little finicky when you're playing all these colors. Because, like, I don't need the Watery Grave. I wouldn't fetch up the Watery Grave. But if it's just in the opening hand, there's not a ton I can do about it. And when I keep a hand that's got, like, 4 or 5 castable cards and just draws into cards that I can't cast, there's not a whole lot you can do about that either. So, see Ragavan on top of their library. Play out the Shadow in the hopes that I can find a red-based removal spell for Dolthy. Unfortunately, I do not. Opponent gets in for 5. And we cannot fetch and shock to get down the Tarmogoyf on our turn. So we would have to draw exactly a removal spell for Dolthy to be able to, like, Dolthy plus Bowmasters. And EE is not it. So, the joy of not hitting land drops. So this is game number 3. This hand, I think, looks a lot worse than it actually is. Like, you see Watery Grave Swamp with Kroxa Terra Sunder. But I've got Nihil Spellbomb to stop a scam early. I've got Fatal Push to interact. I'm pretty okay with, like, getting an aggressive redraw off of Nihil Spellbomb. But it just slows the game down for a couple turns. And I think that's too important to pass up. And then here, opponent misses their second land drop, which means they almost assuredly have some scam sequence in their hand. And the Nihil Spellbomb just, like, stopped them in their tracks. So here, yeah, they go for Scamming the Grief. We'll go ahead and take that out of play and draw a card. Definitely a sequence I'm pretty happy with. And now we get to, like, Kroxa, hold up Bowmasters or hold up Terra Sunder. We can get Overgrown Tomb if they somehow have Simian Spirit Guide Blood Moon. Desperate Ritual Blood Moon. I don't know. So they do have an Undying effect for the Fury, which is okay because, again, I get to go to my turn, kick the Terra Sunder, and deal with it that way if I want. Or I can take the slightly more aggressive line of getting down chump blockers, untapping, escaping Kroxa. Get the last card out of hand. So that cuts out a lot of their really good 3 drops. Because it can't top deck both a land and, like, a Fable. And if they top deck a land, then I know Kroxa's going to get in a lot of damage next turn. They've got no cards in hand, so if they do top deck a removal spell for Kroxa, I still got a chump blocker if I want it. And And since they played the land, we get to tear us under the Croaks, or tear us under the Fury for lethal. Nice. On to match number 4. So, looks like back-to-back scam. Opponent leads on a Thoughtseize, so we're going to get a Ragavan down, but reasonable chance that they've got like a Bowmaster. Drown in the Lock, unfortunately, looking terrible as a draw off of this Stomping Ground start. I was planning on Stomping Ground into Watery Grave to get all of my colors online. Since I do not have a breeding pool in this list, I cannot go Blood Crypt into breeding pool. So when you have 2 lands and you want to get all your colors online, unfortunately, it can be a little sketch. That might be a reason to cut Drown in the Lock and just go back to like a Stubborn Denial. Or not Stubborn Denial, Spell Pierce. Just to make the mana a little more cooperative. So we'll keep all of our cards because I think these are all pretty good. And they're pretty likely like this to trade off the Grief for the Ragavan. So I feel like I've got a lot of good potential draws. And then all I could think of here is like, what are the odds that my opponent activates this Castle Lochthwain? And I get to flash in Bowmaster, ping the Reflection, and then get another copy. And they did. And I was so excited that I cannot begin to describe it. Because they're going to take 3 off the castle. I get to kill their Fable, get down 2 bodies. Now, they do have the follow-up Scammed Fury, but I still have a Tarmogoyf that's bigger than the Fury. It's going to put them down to 1 life, so that Lochthwain's cut off, Marsh Flats is cut off, so they can't have like a back-to-back Scammed Fury, or back-to-back Fury. So I'm safe playing out the Shadow. Here, I'm fine trading off Goy for Fury because I've got the bigger threat at the moment, plus access to Giganta, so I feel pretty confident. Get to force the chump block with Grief, play out a second Shadow, and from there, I do not believe my opponent's got any top decks. Again, not afraid of Fury because they can't crack the Marsh Flats there. Game 2. We already talked about sideboarding against Scam. Fatal Pushes, Tear Asunder, Veil, Hearse, Spellbomb in. Boarding out some Ragavans, some number of Thoughtseize, some Stubborn Denials. Stubborn Denial, really, really good if you've got like a threat out and you're able to get Ferocious online. But against decks that are really over the top good at getting your threats off the board, it becomes a lot less exciting. Because if you're not reliably getting a dude on the battlefield and keeping him there... what did I click? No. Why are we... If you're not reliably getting a threat on the battlefield and keeping it on the battlefield, then it is a lot less exciting. So that was the end of that one. And yeah. So we have to mulligan down pretty low. Or I say low. Mulligan to 6 with a pretty bad 6 because we only have 1 land. Like I said, kind of a recurring theme with this league is only seeing 1-landers or kind of awkward mana. So we're just hoping to draw a second land so we can take care of Grief. Unfortunately, Tarmogoyf is not second land. Last I checked. Could be wrong. Could be a second land. If this were like Lorcana and you could ink it, then it'd be... Or Mental Magic, you play it face down as a Utopia. Either way, They have a Croxa. I want to hold on to this Drown in the Lock for Croxa if possible, because I'm not going to have a ton of ways to deal with that. Blood Moon Fury. If I had more lands and was able to play out my spells, I'd be a little less worried about Blood Moon, but at the moment, I can't exactly play out a threat, hold up Drown. But you can also see where not having a breeding pool can be a little awkward. Like, we had the Blood Crypt to start. We found a fetch land. We had to get Overgrown Tomb to get green for Goyf. And then drew the Stomping Ground. So we didn't have blue until turn 9 here. Again, gotta hold up Drown. Except, kind of have to kill Dolphy, unfortunately. I could wait for it to resolve and then try to kill it, but if they have an Undying effect, then that looks pretty bad for me. But it goes for the Grief. Response will kill the Reflection. It does put us in bolt range, but if I don't kill the Reflection, then they get to Grief, take the Fatal Push. If I target the Grief, then they just get to copy it and get down to, or kill me with that. So at least this doesn't give them like a hasty 3 power menace threat that leaves me dead to Bowmasters. And yeah, I think this is second little stutter here. So they do not have an answer for the Fable, or for the Fatal Push on the Fable. And they didn't have an Undying effect. Obviously, if they had an Undying effect on the Fable, that would be kind of bad, but gotta do what you gotta do. And then this might have been a punt. So I held on to the Shadow because if they escaped Croaks, I needed something to ditch that wouldn't kill me. But if they escaped the Croxa, then they would have been able to exile their own Blood Moon, shrink the Goyf, and I wouldn't be able to attack in and force a chump. So it might have been better to just play out the Shadow and hope they don't hit the land. But in case you missed the very end of that one, they ended up evoking a Fury and bolting my Tarmogoyf when I was at 3 life. And said something in the chat about like, whoops, because I just played out a Shadow. And they just top decked another bolt. So it's like, all right, fair enough. The world is as it should be. They didn't notice I'd gone down to 3 life. Either way, on to game 3 against Scam. Reasonable hand, actually. We've got an answer to like a Scam threat. We've got Fable as a good follow-up. Our mana is solid. We can actually get all 4 colors of mana plus basic Swamp. So you want to keep an eye out for when that's a possibility. I can get like Stomping Ground, Watery Grave, and then basic Swamp for a little bit of Blood Moon protection. Or I guess I go Steam Vents, whatever, since I've got Overgrown Tomb in hand. Something, something, all roads roam, something. They Blood Moon. Again, this is the power of cards like Fable, is, hey, I get a lot of protection against Blood Moon. Like, if you've watched any of the Jund videos I've posted recently, I'm actually playing Blood Moon in the sideboard of that one. Because once you get enough, like, Ragavans, Fables, Giganta going, then you don't care about Blood Moon. You have so many ways of fighting over it. So I go for the end of the turn, bolt the token. I figure if they had a Fatal Push, they would use it. So when they didn't Fatal Push something after the token left, I'm assuming they just don't have one, in which case I'm going to get my Goblin tokens going for all they're worth. Try to completely invalidate this Blood Moon here. Get all of my mana available. Opponent untaps. Finds the 5th land. So they've got Fury. Wipe out my board. So I could go for an end of turn terminate and then untap and Kroxa. But I don't want to lose all of my access to like green and black mana with these treasures. So I decided to just go to my turn, escape the Kroxa, and pass. I can hold up the heat or terminate if I absolutely need to kill something. But if my opponent doesn't do anything and doesn't deal with the Kroxa, then I'm just going to wait till my next turn, have all my spells available, not have to use up my treasures so I can save them in case I draw more Tarmogoyfs or Terra Sunders or whatever. And then it's really important when your opponent's got cards in hand like that, make the attack first so you can see what you need to do afterwards. If they had like an Undying effect, maybe they cast it. I can respond with killing the dude. If they don't have an Undying effect and they go down to 5 in this case off discarding a land, then I know I can just kill the 2 guys and have a clear and free board. It just makes it a lot simpler to have all the known information out there. Like, I know I'm attacking with the Kroxa because I've got removal spells to deal with the board. But maybe they have, like, Bowmaster, and it changes up what I want to do with my removal spells. So we're on to match 5. Chris, MTG, very popular Amulet Titan player. Definitely a game where I would have much preferred to be on the play than the draw, because I would have had Stubborn Denial for the Amulet. But here we just have to go into aggro mode. There's not much else we can do. We could hold up Stubborn Denial and try to soft stub something, which ironically would have looked pretty good here, but it would have meant I would have not played to the board at all. And contrary to popular belief, not playing to the board with your shadow deck is a pretty rough time. So they ended up playing and resolving a 1 ring there. Again, could have soft stubbed that, but I'm not playing around the 1 ring when I need to get pressure. And if I take the turn off, then they just get a turn closer to casting Titans. So, because I'm tapped out, they kind of get free reign. If I had the 3rd land here, then I could have played out the Goyf, held up the Stubborn Denial for the Summoner's Pact, and it would have been a bit better. But fortunately, that's not the way it worked out. So we have to go to game 2. Board again. Alpine Moons, Terra Sunders, EE, help fight over amulets. Then Alpine Moon, Terra Sunder. Terra Sunder for Amulet, Saga, Dryad. Alpine Moon can not only hit like Urza Saga, but it's good about naming bounce lands. Stop them from going crazy with mana if you can narrow down to exactly what bounce land they have. So I could have held up on Holy Heat, but it's really not doing anything for me. And then I thought about EE on 1 here. Like, I know it takes out Ragavan, Grazer, Shadow, but I'd be able to take out amulets. So I do have to be kind of careful about my mana considerations here. Pinging them versus pinging myself with the Bowmasters doesn't change anything because I don't have multiple shadows out. What I mean by that is if I ping myself with 2 shadows out, then I'm getting +2 power. If I ping myself with 1 shadow out, I'm only getting +1 power, which is the same as just pinging them. Especially in a game that's not going more turns. And then a misclick there. I cast an EE, meant to cast it on 1. Unfortunately, it did not register me clicking my floating mana. So I ended up with an EE on 0. And then, of course, when I cracked it there, didn't do a whole lot. And then Magic Online kind of freezes again here. So essentially all that happens is they end up exiling my yard, and then I believe play a 1 ring here, and I have to take the turn off, and the next turn they have Bounce Land, Titan, Haste Up, Bounce Land, blah, 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 blah. Like the works. So, back to the list. What did I think? Definitely going up at least 1 land, possibly 2. There's been a lot of times when I've played 4-color lists that I've really wanted access to like Wrenn 6, because even though Shadow at its core, Death Shadow is like an archetype, is really good at taking advantage of low land count situations, especially when you get to these 4-color lists. That is no longer the case. You need the 3rd, 4th land very, very aggressively, because you need to be able to cast your spells, and you're going to need some very specific color combinations to make them work proficiently. That being said, I did think it was very easy to get back Kroxa in this list. Don't think we ever really had any problems when we had 4 mana sources with escaping Kroxa. We even got to wait for the 5th against Zoo to escape Kroxa with a Stubborn Denial up. So that was really nice. Fable and Ragavan were really excellent at providing us some support value against Blood Moon. Fable, I thought, again, was really solid for filtering our hand, for helping with the mana, for providing something to do late game. Giganta was fine. The biggest, I don't want to say knock on the list, because I don't really think of it as like a straight up knock, but the biggest thing I noticed about this list was the blue felt largely unnecessary. Like, there were some spots where having the blue was fine, but it didn't come in too much handy because I wasn't hitting my lands. For example, the blue was good against the Beanstalks out of Zoo, so that was good. But then against, like, Scam, I don't think I ever really needed them. I think I stubbed 1 Fable 1 time, and that was kind of cool. But other than that, the blue was largely irrelevant. So for me, I've been on Jund pretty recently, and I think that kind of validated that, because if the blue was unnecessary, but I can run Jund, run the same core of Shadow, Thoughtseize, Ragavan, Push, Bolt, Heat, Terminate, Kroxa, Fable, Goyf, Bowmasters, but cut the blue for cleaner mana, less mana inconsistencies, and then give myself access to Blood Moon in the sideboard for the unfair stuff, then to me that's worth it. But it might not be the case for everybody. But I could also see running a variant of Jund main with the Stubborn Denials in the sideboard. I just wish there was a way to configure that to just cut out like the Tarmogoyf's post board for the Stubborn Denials, and not make yourself a 4-color dependent deck post board instead of 3-color. Because if you make yourself the 4-color dependent deck, then you're going to have awkward hands from time to time. And I don't think there's really a great way to combat that. But maybe if somebody's able to find a mana base they like with a couple blue sources, a playset of Stubborn Denial on the sideboard, and just say, like, that's my plan for the unfair stuff, board and 4 Stub and Pray, maybe it would be cool to check out. So let me know if you're working on something like that, or send me a link, post it down below. Definitely want to check those out. Otherwise, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. As always, I'll have a link to the Twitter down below if you want to know whenever streams are going live, as well as the stream itself, the Twitch link, and the Discord link. So if you want to come join the Control Freak Discord, talk about Shadow, tell me about your impressions with 4-color. Love to hear them. Yeah, otherwise, catch y'all later. Adios for now.